Why some people stop posting their lives online. There's something strangely unsettling about this. You run into an old friend, you sit down and talk for almost an hour, you laugh, you catch up, you hear about life, and then later that night you get home and suddenly realize something. Their social media is almost completely silent. No new photos, no stories, no updates, nothing. And in a world where almost everyone is posting on Instagram, uploading to TikTok, or turning everyday life into content, people like that feel almost impossible to read. How are they living? What are they doing? And maybe the question people quietly ask the most is, why don't they want anyone to know? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what are they protecting? I remember a night like that. A group of friends got together for dinner. The food had barely hit the table before the phones came out. One person adjusted the angle. Another turned on the flash. Someone said, "Wait, don't touch it yet. I need the photo." 10 minutes later, the meal finally started. But at that table, there was one person who didn't take a single picture. No posting, no check-in, no story, no, "let me get this real quick." They just sat there, eating, listening, present. And while everyone else was busy editing photos and uploading them, one friend started opening up. They talked about how exhausted they were from work. They talked about family problems. They talked about the kind of stress people usually hide behind a smile. No one really noticed, except one person, the only person not holding a phone. And after dinner, that friend said something simple but unforgettable. "Thank you. Today you were the only one who actually listened to me." That's the strange thing about people who don't constantly broadcast their lives. Sometimes they're the only ones fully inside the moment. There's actually a psychological reason for this. Some people naturally pay more attention to their inner world than to how they appear from the outside. They ask themselves, what am I really feeling right now? Instead of, how does this look to everyone else? And that difference changes more than we realize. Because for a lot of people, the moment something beautiful happens, the first instinct is no longer, wow. It's, can I post this? What should I caption it? Will this do numbers? Who's going to see this? But people who live more privately, people who rarely show up online, tend to react differently. They're not thinking about the audience. They're not thinking about the algorithm. They're not thinking about how the moment will look. They're just living it. And here's the part most people never hear. Researchers have found that even thinking about sharing an experience online can make you enjoy it less. Not posting it, not editing it, not uploading it, just thinking about posting it. That alone is enough. Why? Because the second your brain starts preparing the moment for other people, part of you leaves the moment itself. Now your attention is split. Which angle looks best? What should I write? Should I post now or later? Who's going to react? The moment is still happening, but you're no longer fully there. And people who live privately often avoid that, not because they hate technology, not because they're antisocial, not because they're trying to disappear, but because they're holding on to something that's becoming incredibly rare. The ability to fully experience their own life while it's happening. If you grew up in the United States before smartphones took over, you probably understand this immediately. There was a generation that grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. No Instagram stories, no TikTok, no constant pressure to document every moment. No invisible audience waiting to react. Kids played basketball in the driveway until the streetlights came on. They rode bikes around the neighborhood. They hung out at the mall for hours. They went to concerts, road trips, birthday parties, summer nights, and most of it was never recorded. Not because it wasn't meaningful, but because it didn't need proof. Those moments didn't need an audience. They didn't need validation. They didn't need witnesses. They happened, and that was enough. They still mattered, even if no one else ever saw them. And maybe that's why some people, even now, still carry that instinct with them. They still know how to enjoy a moment without turning it into content. And honestly, that might not even be the most powerful part. Because people who live privately often have something a lot of other people are quietly losing: inner peace. They're not constantly running the same exhausting loop in their head. Did that post get enough likes? Why did fewer people watch my story today? Do I look boring? Am I falling behind? Does my life seem interesting enough? Instead, they ask one much simpler question, a much healthier one. Does this moment actually mean something to me? That's it. And that question changes everything, because the moment your life stops being a performance, it starts becoming yours again. There was a famous long-term study that followed hundreds of people across decades of their lives, from youth all the way into old age. The researchers wanted to answer one simple question: what actually makes a person happy? Not what looks successful, not what sounds impressive, not what gets attention, what truly makes life feel meaningful. And the answer wasn't money. It wasn't fame. It wasn't status. It wasn't how many people knew your name. It was something much quieter: the quality of your close relationships, the people who truly know who you are, not the edited version, not the polished version, not the version you post, the real version, the one that exists when no one is watching. So maybe the better question is this: who actually knows you? Not who follows you, not who watches your stories, not who likes your posts, but who still knows you, even when you post nothing at all. Of course, this story isn't completely romantic. Living privately has a cost too. Some people step away from social media because they want peace, but others step away because they got hurt. Maybe they shared something real once and no one responded. Maybe they posted something vulnerable and it got misunderstood. Maybe they learned the hard way that silence feels safer than exposure. And that matters. Because when you become less visible, some relationships quietly fade. Not because people hate you, but because there's no longer a place for them to casually bump into your life. No random update, no story, no post, no reminder. And in a strange way, social media has become the modern version of accidental closeness. Without it, some people drift. But the people who truly want to stay, they text, they call, they check in, they make the effort. They don't need your profile to remember you exist. And maybe that's how you learn who really cares. That's why people who live privately often build something a lot of people never do: a stable sense of self. They don't need likes to feel seen. They don't need views to feel real. They don't need constant updates to prove they're living. And still, they know their life matters. They know their joy is real. They know their pain is real. They know their moments count, even if no one else ever sees them. And when you no longer need the world to witness your life in order to believe it has value, you become free. Free in a way that's hard to explain, because now your life is no longer half-lived for the approval of strangers. It's yours. Completely yours. Maybe the most private people aren't hiding from the world. Maybe they've just learned something the rest of us are still trying to remember: that not every moment needs to be shared to be meaningful. That not every memory needs to become content. That not every beautiful part of your life needs an audience to prove it was real. Some moments are supposed to belong only to you. Some joys are deeper when they stay unannounced. Some pain is more honest when it isn't turned into a caption. And some of the most meaningful parts of life happen quietly, without applause, without validation, without anyone else watching. Maybe that's why people who live more privately often seem calmer. Because they're not constantly asking the world, "Do you see me?" They've already answered a much more important question for themselves: am I truly here? And maybe that's the real freedom. To stop performing. To stop proving. To stop turning your life into something that always needs to be seen. And to finally let it be what it was always meant to be: your life. Not a highlight reel, not a personal brand, not a performance. Just yours. Lived deeply, lived honestly, lived before it is explained. Because in the end, the people who post the least are not always the ones with the least to show. Sometimes they're the ones who are finally too busy living to make sure everyone else is watching. Sometimes the most private people aren't absent from life, they're just fully present in it.